Here we go. There we go. All right. So this is a sort of a wrap-up extra session. Particularly Randy asked me to do this to connect with our annual stewardship campaign, to talk about that, you know, generosity and stewardship are integral to discipleship. And so I'm going to do this a little bit of review. So you're going to see stuff in the slides that you've seen before, and we're just maybe go into a little more depth in that particular piece about, and what I want to focus on is the spiritual power of habit, and what I like to call holy habits, which is really a lot of what Methodism and discipleship in the Methodist Wesleyan tradition is about. So we'll start again with a prayer. This again is a portion of a prayer by John Wesley. So let us pray. Oh, lift up our affections to things above, that we may have perfect contentment in well-doing and patient suffering, and the good hope we have of being eternally beloved of you may make us rejoice evermore. Free us from the cares of the world, from all distrust of your good providence, from complaining at anything that befalls us, and enable us to everything to give thanks, believing that all things are ordered wisely and shall work together for good. Amen.
Amen.
So I want to begin with, I'm going to talk some about this little book, which I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before. If I highly recommend it. It's called, this is the title that's on the screen there, You Are What You Love, The Spiritual Power of Habit. The author is James K.A. Smith. And he is a philosopher, a Christian philosopher, who teaches at Calvin University. In fact, he lives right here in Grand Rapids. And he has become one of my favorite writers. He's a fairly prolific writer. So this book he published, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I highly recommend it. And he wrote it for a lay audience. And so we're going to get into at least part of his argument about where he's talking about who we are as human beings and how we are formed and how our behavior is influenced. And he begins with this quote from the Gospel according to John. Because what he's writing about is the nature of discipleship and how people are formed as disciples of Jesus Christ. So this is from the first chapter of John. The next day, John again was standing with 2 of his disciples. And as he watched Jesus walk by, he exclaimed, "There, or look, here is the Lamb of God." The 2 disciples heard him say this, and they followed Jesus. When Jesus turned and saw them following, he said to them, "What do you want?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher, "where are you staying?" And he said to them, "Come and see." They came and saw where he was staying, and they remained with him that day. So notice here, these disciples are, they're disciples of John the Baptist. This is shortly after Jesus is baptized by John. And John sees Jesus walking by, and he points out to his disciples, there's the Lamb of God. And they go start following him. And when Jesus realizes he's being followed, he turns and says to them, he doesn't say, and I think this is important, and certainly Smith thinks this is very important. It's important that what Jesus doesn't say to them. He doesn't ask them, "What do you know?" Or he doesn't even ask, "What do you believe?" He asks, "What do you want?" And Smith says, this is the most incisive, piercing question Jesus can ask of us, precisely because we are what we want. Our wants and longings and desires are at the core of our identity, the wellspring from which our actions and behavior flow. Our wants reverberate from our heart, the epicenter of the human person.
That's good.
So Jesus, then this is a quote from Smith. Jesus as a teacher who is a teacher who doesn't just inform our intellect, but forms our very loves. He isn't content to simply deposit new ideas into your mind. He is after nothing less than your wants, your loves, your longings. To follow Jesus is to become a student of the rabbi who teaches us how to love.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us to the power of habit. And Smith argues in this book that we need to and this is, I think, really something of a mistake that we, particularly in the West, have made with the Enlightenment and the Cartesian understanding, that, that idea from Descartes in the early Enlightenment, where, who said, I am because I think because I am, or which basically the belief then is that human beings are essentially thinking things, which we are certainly thinking things, rational beings who have intellect and curiosity. But human beings are not primarily thinking things. Human beings are first and foremost lovers. Another way of putting that, we are creatures of desire. Human beings are defined more by our desire, by our wants, than by what we know or believe. And that the center of the human person is the heart and not the head. The heart, or the cardia, or another way of putting that, the gut.
That's right.
And the illustration, and I do highly recommend this book. The illustration of the way Smith gets at that is he takes you on on a walk through, he says, imagine you're an alien from outer space, and you've come and you've been observing human behavior, and you follow them into what, by everything you can discern, is some kind of holy temple, with certain rituals and liturgies, and so he walks you through this temple, and you eventually figure out what he's describing is the mall down on 28th, because that's what he's talking, because that's the mall that he knows. That's, he teaches right, at Calvin University, not far from there, and he lives in Grand Rapids. So I know that's the mall he was thinking about when he was writing that. And his point of that is that the people who understand how to motivate us to behave in a certain way, to want what they want us to want, are marketers and salespeople. And if you think about commercials and marketing campaigns, they're almost never directed at your head, at your intellect. They're always directed at the heart, at the cardia, at your gut. They're aimed at creating desire for you to want whatever it is that they're selling. And then through those desires, they're able, through effective marketing, to develop habits of buying and consuming, and I think Smith is right, and I think Wesley understood, and Jesus understood, how people are motivated. We're motivated by what we want, by what we love, much more than by what we say we believe, or even by what we know. Our wants and our desires, our loves, have much greater influence on our behavior and our habits. And habits, the importance of habit is through habits that desire and love is formed and developed. Are you with me?
Yes.
I think this is something where the church can really grapple with this idea, because I think so much of church is about the head. There is so much that we focus on about beliefs, as opposed to coming down into the heart.
Exactly. That is, and that's precisely the argument that Smith makes, is a mistake that the Western Church made.
Correct.
At the advent of the Enlightenment.
Yep. This is Rohr too. Rohr will say all of these same things. Yep.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll say it again, because Rohr is a Wesleyan.
Yeah.
Well, it's because Rohr is a Franciscan. So I just want to review the next set of slides is stuff that I've shown you before, and I just thought we would review this tonight again, because it is ultimately about, and this is Wesley from his sermon. It's sermon number 92. The title is On Zeal. And Wesley's definition of Christian zeal is love. Is agape, that self-giving, self-emptying love, revealed and given to the world by God in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And this is one paragraph in which Wesley succinctly describes how Christians are formed through the development of habits. So he begins by describing the goal, the telos, the end of, the aim of discipleship, of the Christian life. And that is, and this is, in a Christian believer, love sits upon the throne which is erected in the inmost soul, namely love of God and humankind, which fills the whole heart and reigns without a rival. So this love is the aim, the goal. And that love is formed through the development of what Wesley calls holy tempers. Now that is, and we're going to unpack that a little bit. So he's in the circle near the throne are all holy tempers: long-suffering, gentleness, meekness, fidelity, temperance, and if any other were comprised in the mind which was in Christ Jesus. Now, tempers is an 18th century term that defined as an enduring habitual temperament of a person. So these are, in a sense, habitual characters or characteristics that are formed in us that the Apostle Paul called the fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5:22 and 23. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So as I'll just continue with Wesley because he explains it better than I can. So he continuing says, in an exterior circle are all the works of mercy, whether to the souls or bodies of people. By these we exercise all holy tempers. By these we continually improve them, so that all these are real means of grace, although this is not commonly adverted to. So by works of mercy, these are what we would call today acts of compassion, which Wesley describes in the general rules as by doing no harm of every possible kind. I mean, by doing good of every possible kind, and as far as possible to all people, to their bodies, by giving food to the hungry, by clothing the naked, by visiting and helping them that are sick or in prison. And then he gives other examples. And acts of justice, which is by doing no harm, by avoiding evil of every kind, especially that which is generally practiced, by living simply so that our neighbors may simply live free from fear of oppression. And Wesley argues that when we are intentional about engage and practicing these works of mercy, these acts of compassion and acts of justice, that we exercise the holy tempers that the Holy Spirit has placed in us. Those holy tempers of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, and self, all 9 of those habitual temperaments that are formed in us by intentionally and seeking out opportunities. And when God places opportunities in our way, to take advantage, to go with those opportunities by being compassionate, being kind, being generous with people that we encounter or that know about in our daily lives. And then also by being intentional about acting for justice, joining with others to address the causes of suffering in the world, the causes of injustice. Right now we're all engaged in a huge act of, I hope we're all engaged in a huge act of justice in this country, which is voting and encouraging our neighbors to vote, and being part of that process in our nation. And then Wesley continues, next to these are those that are usually termed works of piety: reading and hearing the word, public, family, private prayer, receiving the Lord's Supper, fasting or abstinence. So, the works of mercy are how we love our neighbor as ourselves. These works of piety are how we love God with all of our heart, soul, and mind. How we intentionally participate in our relationship with God. How we keep our daily appointments with God. Through, again, the public is, acts of worship, which are the public worship of God, the ministry of the word, either read or expounded, and participating in the Lord's Supper, balanced by the personal, family and private prayer, searching the scriptures, and fasting or abstinence. So these practices that Jesus himself practiced and taught his disciples to practice are how we stay close to God and how we attend to God in our lives. And then God, the more we are attentive to God in our personal lives, then God opens up our eyes, our ears, our heart to see where God is at work in the world around us, which then leads us, to acts of works of mercy, serving and helping and being generous and kind to our neighbors. And finally, that as followers may the more effectually provoke one another to love, holy tempers, and good works. Our blessed Lord has united them together in one body, the church, dispersed all over the earth, a little emblem of which, of the church universal, we have in every particular Christian congregation. So I love, he's quoting in the beginning of this final sentence. Wesley is quoting without attribution Hebrews 10:25, that we may more effectually provoke one another to love, holy tempers, and good works. So the writer of Hebrews just says to provoke one another, to regularly meet together in order to provoke one another to love and good works. Wesley adds holy tempers. So the purpose of the church is to bring followers of Jesus together in community to help one another, to compel one another, to encourage one another, to love themselves, to love God, and to love who God loves, to love God's world, to love their neighbors as themselves. And it's in that intentional practice of development of these habits of works of mercy and works of piety that these holy tempers are formed in us, and the love of God grows in our hearts, that the damage that sin has done in us is repaired and healed, and all sin is removed and replaced by the love of God, so that our heart becomes so filled with the love of God that there's no longer room for sin or fear to be part of us, that our natural response to the world and to people is love, not fear. So in the church, and Wesley, makes a point of saying that the church is the community that we are all brought into this community, because first of all, we can't do this alone. Following Jesus is not something that we were ever intended to do alone. We are to do it together in a community centered in the life and mission of Jesus Christ. And in that community, we make commitments to one another and to God, to develop these habits. And this is, what's on the screen here now is, you've heard this all before. Every time we receive new members, every time we reaffirm our baptismal covenant, we reaffirm this promise: as members of the body of Christ and in this congregation of the United Methodist Church, we will faithfully participate in the ministries of the church by our prayers, our presence, our gifts, and our witness, that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. So in that promise, we have a list of 4 habits of discipleship that are essential to our life together as members of Trinity United Methodist Church. The first is, we promise to give our prayers. And I think this is integral to stewardship. We make a basically promise to be a good steward, and these are gifts that we all bring to Christ through the church. So prayers, to regular conversation with God and attending to our relationship with God, opening ourselves to God, and also, praying for, certainly the members of the congregation who are in need of prayer, praying for the church, praying for the world and the needs of the world, and opening our hearts. That's what prayer does, is it opens our hearts to God and to God's world beyond ourselves. I don't know if what just comes to mind, when I'm talking about prayer, there's a scene from the movie Shadowlands. Have you all seen Shadowlands?
No.
Starring Anthony Hopkins. It's a story about C.S. Lewis and his marriage to his wife, Joy. I always forget her name. So what happens in their relationship is you all know who C.S. Lewis is, right?
Right.
Okay, so he marries this American woman who is an extraordinary woman, who is an American, who comes over and it starts out, she's basically a fan of Lewis, and they started by corresponding to each other. And they end up getting married. And shortly after the marriage, she's diagnosed with, I think it was breast cancer. It's either breast cancer or lung cancer. And so she's treated in the hospital for the cancer. And Lewis, who is a man at that point of very deep faith, is with her every day and is praying for her. And he's sort of taken a leave from his teaching duties at Magdalen College. And then his wife goes, the cancer goes into remission. They get this good news. And Lewis goes back to the school and he's putting on his teaching gown when several of his colleagues and friends gather around him. And they all, say, we've heard the good news. And we know you've been praying for Joy, and God must have heard your prayers. And I don't know, I suspect Lewis wrote something like this, but in the movie, Anthony Hopkins as C.S. Lewis replies to his friends, yes, I have been praying every day, every hour for this to happen. But he said, you need to understand, I don't pray so I can change God. I pray so that God can change me. And I've never forgotten that is ultimately what prayer is about coming into God's presence and opening ourselves to God so that God can change me and form me into the person God created me to be. And so that's what happens when we make prayer a habit. The second is presence. Presence means simply showing up, participating in the life of the church, showing up like you are tonight and on Sunday morning. And we had I was pleased with the turnout that we had for our communion and music on the lawn on Sunday evening. Some of you were there. And we're going to try that again on the 25th, weather permitting. Wow. But that commitment to show up, to be present, and then to share our gifts with God. Certainly, and a big part, an important part of that is our giving of our income, proportionate to our income, of returning a portion of our income to God, to the support of God's mission through the church, and prayerfully, making a habit of giving, of being generous, a habit of generous giving with not just our money, but also with the gifts and the talents and abilities that God has given us, to share those as well with the church and with God's mission through the church. Which that's connected with then service is, sharing our spiritual gifts and our talents to serve, because we are baptized to serve, not necessarily to be served, but to serve. And finally, our witness is to live our lives in a way that others can experience Christ's love and justice through us, through our lives and our conversation, in our deeds and in our actions and in our words, by confidently sharing our faith with others, and living in a way that people can see Christ in us. So these are the habits that the church aims to form in us. And that's ultimately, that's why I have this quote from Jesus, John 13. Jesus said to us, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And the way that we love one another is to support and help one another develop and form these habits of discipleship. All right, I'm going to stop there. And open it up for any questions or
Um,
comments.
Then by developing these habits, do we become marketers of the faith? Is that how we become? Because we really need to market the church. And do we do that through our experiences and through our examples?
I'm gonna say, Randy, I don't like the image of marketing.
Okay.
And I'm going to go with my mentor, my dear friend David Lowes Watson, who you all met via Zoom at the end of July when he preached. And he started off his teaching career teaching evangelism. And evangelism is what you're talking about. And that's a huge part of witness. And David made, at least for me, a convincing argument that, again, another mistake that the church made with evangelism was to equate it with sales. That our job is to sell Jesus to the world. Well, what do you do when you try to sell, certainly there are lots of really good salespeople who don't have to manipulate people and tell, basically lie to you to get you to buy their stuff. But David argues that, first of all, sales is not a biblical metaphor for evangelism. What is that of journalist. That our job is to share the news, is to tell the news, to tell the truth. That's ultimately what journalists are about, is they are people who seek the truth and then do their best to tell the truth to the world. So our job is to be good journalists. That's what I want to say. To be good storytellers. And that's another way of, sharing good news, of sharing this gospel in a way that it is good news for people who need it. And that's why I say we do it both through the way we live our lives and also the way we share this good news with others. Doing it in a way that is good news to them and doesn't come across as being judgmental or that, my faith is better than yours. If you've got any faith, mine is better than yours. That's not the way that's not evangelism. And also evangelism is not proselytizing either. And witnessing is not about proselytizing. It's simply sharing what you know and what you've experienced of, in this context, of Jesus Christ and of his gospel and of the kingdom of God. And the kingdom of God is the very center of Jesus's gospel. That's what Jesus came to proclaim, was the world as we know it is not the way it's always going to be. And when we develop these holy habits, God opens our eyes and our ears and our heart to be able to see where the kingdom of God is breaking out in the world all around us. And so then, as good journalists, as good witnesses to Jesus Christ, we can help others to see where the kingdom of God is breaking out. And you see that where people are healed, where prisoners are set free from addiction and illness and oppression, where people are having the blind have their eyes opened, and that blindness is, certainly where people who were blind can now see. That is a sign of the kingdom. but also people whose eyes, they may be functioning and they may be able to see, but they're blinded to the reality of God and God's love in the world around us. And we have the ability as witnesses to Jesus Christ to help take those blinders off of their eyes. I'm starting to preach now. So
Good.
does that make sense to you, Randy?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would.
I just want to say, I just really, that image of the evangelist as journalist, I think makes more sense to me than that of, us. We're not, I've never thought of myself as someone out here just trying to sell people on Jesus. Marita, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just a reflection too around that area. But I think it's fair to say we don't grow the church, that God grows the church. I think there's a concern, there can be a concern about, I think we always have to be concerned about where our ego wants to just slip in without us being recognized, without us recognizing it. And so I think if we are working at having holy habits of discipleship, as we look for places where God is breaking out, then as we act on that, then God grows the church as opposed to us trying to grow the church. Is that fair?
That's 100% spot on, Marita. And again, that's another mistake we have made in the church growth movement. Because the emphasis of church growth is that we are the ones that grow the church by coming up with ways of attracting people to it. And that's another form of sales and manipulation. Whereas in the scriptures, those early, Paul and those apostles, how the church grew was through being open to the leading of the Holy Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit that brings people into the church. And going to the places where God is active, and then, identifying where God is at work and then going to those places is where the church grows. And we become participants with God in God's mission.
I think that another place for us to participate in God's growing the church is where we can practice sharing our suffering, because the people around us in the world, there is so much suffering, right? Just so much suffering. And when we can reveal our suffering, I think that becomes a more attractive place for people to connect with us than if we kind of try to present this really, again, kind of presenting, right? And not being authentic, but presenting something that's going to attract people. I don't believe it's that we have to be heavy-hearted, but I think we have to be so honest about how difficult life is and how hard it is for us to do our lives, because I think that will connect with other people who also struggle.
Yeah, I agree.
Very good.
And as we, and this is a point, I wanted that as we are intentional, and this again is the importance of being in small groups, those early Methodists, where they, to use again Wesley's language, of where they watched over one another in love, where they encouraged one another to develop these holy habits, to help one another to grow and to mature in holiness of heart and life. to grow in love of God and love of neighbor, and to become fully the persons God created them to be. That happened primarily in the small groups, where the people were encouraged to form these habits, and to allow these practices, these habits, to shape their faith and their life. Because you can't, that's not what worship does. Worship is one of the habits, as is being present in worship, and also hopefully in a small group where you're helped to work on developing these habits of prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness. And that, through the other important, that I haven't really talked a lot about, a important part of certainly the class meeting and of Methodism was generosity. People were encouraged to give, to contribute to the mission of the society. And through that giving, Methodists were able then to be a highly missional movement, particularly in ministry with the poor and the sick. One of the things, that, every time you went to your class meeting, they took up a collection. You were to give a penny back, in the late 19th, 18th century. A penny was actually worth something. And those offerings were then put into, at least portions of those offerings were put into a lending stock. I think I mentioned this earlier. A lending stock that the society could draw on, that, when people needed, they would then give microloans to people to help them to buy raw materials for their own little business, where they would make, there was lots of cottage industries going on. People were, were weaving fabrics in their homes and stuff. And so people could borrow a little bit of money to get the supplies they needed to make money to support their families. They could borrow money to get a relative out of debtor's prison. And then they would pay it back over time, interest-free, so that others could borrow it. The Methodists also used money. They distributed, they were one among maybe the first free medical clinics in the world, or at least in England, were in Methodist societies in London and Bristol and Newcastle, where sick people could come and receive medicine and treatment for free. So these are the kinds of things, through the generosity of the Methodist people, they were able to do, to be in service with particularly the poor of their community. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question.
Yes,
What is the main takeaway that you would like us to take away from tonight?
that's a great question, Ruth. Thank you.
I hope it's a softball question, not a hardball.
No, I hope the main is that discipleship is all about forming habits of love, of learning how to love like Jesus. And Jesus has given us everything we know, everything we need to form these habits. And it's in the formation of these habits that we grow in holiness of heart and life, that we grow in our love of God and our love of our neighbors and ourselves. that we become more fully the persons God created us to be. And it's these habits that Christian discipleship is much more than simply agreeing to a creed or a set of beliefs or doctrines. That's not discipleship. That's important. You know, those teachings and that knowledge is good, but that knowledge should lead us to these practices. That discipleship is a way of life. That's what I want you, and I think you all already know this. But the other piece is an important way of making sure that you're developing these habits is by being in a small group that supports you in developing and growing these habits. And that's why I'm offering and put before you this model of what I'm calling grace groups. So in order to, to maybe begin organizing at least one group, I don't know how many we can get started. And I really have no idea how many people are interested, because, we put these, so this slide is certainly for you all who are here live, but I'm suspecting there's also others in the congregation who are watching the recordings of this, who I hope are also interested. So this is what I would like you to do. If you're interested in being in a grace group, some of you have already sent me emails telling me that you are interested. I'd like you to send me a little more information. And if you have, is to send me an email at pastorsteve@grtumc.org. Tell me the days and times you are available to be in a meeting of at least 1 hour, of the preferred frequency of the group that you would, if you want. You all know, I think the best way to do this is by meeting every week, but I know that's not going to work for everybody. So tell me the frequency. If you want to meet in a weekly meeting, a bi-weekly meeting, or a monthly meeting. And whether or not you want to meet in person or virtual. Because I have heard from some people that they want to be in a group, but they just don't feel safe meeting in person right now. And so there's ways we don't have, we can do it using Zoom, and there's other platforms that can be used for virtual meetings. So that's what I would like you, this is, so send me that email with these 3 things: the day and time you're available for a meeting, the preferred frequency of the group meetings that you would be willing, that you want to be a part of, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, and how you want the meeting to, happen, either in person or online or virtual. Is that clear?
Yes.
Any other final questions?
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Actually 2. So are people expected to donate every single time they meet? I mean, do you need to verbally tell people in your group?
What do you mean
About-
donate?
Didn't you just say that they were giving monies to?
Oh, well, that was the early Methodist class meeting.
But that's not us.
That's
No.
not us, no.
Okay, so my second question is, you asked that the leaders meet with you once a month to give feedback?
Yes, I would like to have, a monthly or quarterly, some kind of regular meeting with leaders, because,
Do you need to tell the members of your group that their information might be shared with you?
no, I'm not asking the leaders to break any confidences or anything. I just want to check in with the leaders and find out how it's going with the groups. That's it.
Okay,
And if there's something happening in the group where the leader might they may need some help. I can, where I may need, they might want me to come in and help, or if there's someone, certainly if there's someone sick that I need to know about, and the person wants me to, I would guess they would want me to know and want the church to know. That's another way of, but the purpose of that meeting is basically for me to support the leaders, whoever is the hosts, and also for them to give me just a sense, is it going okay? Great. If it's not, let's talk about what the difficulties are. Is that clear?
Mhm. But I
Yeah.
would probably say to somebody, is it okay if I share this with Pastor
Oh,
Steve?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's, yeah. But yeah, what again, and I think it's important that for group dynamic, that whatever is shared in group meetings stays in the group meetings.
Yeah.
That, members of the group then don't go out, and the leader doesn't come and I'm not interested in the leaders telling me everything that's said and done in their groups, Any other questions?
I have a question, just from the viewpoint of somebody signing up. I think for me, I would almost want to hear from, like, to have the leaders picked first, and then the leaders describe sort of what the character of their group would be, or how they see their group working, because there might be some variations. And then, that might lead me more towards one group or another. I'm having a little trouble just doing this in the abstract, I think.
Okay. Well, I guess the way I sort of have envisioned this is, well, and I've shared with you my suggested, agenda for the meetings and the shape of the meetings. But it's also open for the groups to decide what the agenda is going to be for each group. And so, groups may take my suggestion and say, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something else, and let them figure out for themselves what they want to do. Does that help you, Ruth?
Yeah,
I guess
think
my
so.
point is that you can shape the group that you're in. You help that group to shape whatever, because I'm thinking once I have the information of the days and times people are available, the frequency, then I can start, hopefully there'll be enough pattern there that, one or two groups, get a sense of who's going to fit where. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah.
Because I don't have this all figured out right now, so I welcome any input as we go along. And I'm also thinking once I hear from enough people, I think it would be helpful to have a Zoom session with everyone, and I'll again present the suggestion, and I can also email more information to everybody as a resource.
Steve, I have one suggestion.
Yeah.
I wonder if there could be a way to set some parameters around how long the groups will meet. My experience is if we start something and we don't have a way for people to leave politely, they often just fall by the wayside, and it's the worst thing for a group to experience. So even if a group decides, like, let's just say the group just that we project that this is a 6-month commitment, or this is a 3-month commitment. any group can then say, let's do another 3 months, let's do another 6 months, let's do whatever. But if we don't have something at the other end, this is my experience from working with groups.
Yeah.
If we don't have something at the other end, people, for different reasons, life gets busy, they lose interest, who knows what. Once people start leaving and it's not, there's not a nice way to leave, what happens is groups just can end up kind of dying on the vine because people can leave, and it just happens in groups. So just a thought.
Yeah. Okay, that's a, so your suggestion is to say these, you're signing up for 3 months.
Whatever it is the
Or-
church might, or you might want to start with, yes. Mhm.
And then after 3 months, you reevaluate.
Correct. It gives
then-
people a nice way to leave, keeping their head up. Otherwise, we create shame without intending to, and that doesn't work well.
Oh, okay. I'll
I,
just say my experience with covenant discipleship groups is, people after a certain, maybe a couple of months, they figure out, I really don't like this. I'm not going to do it anymore. And they, and they tell, and we just say, okay, that's fine. but that, I like, that's a very good idea, Marita. Yeah, thank you. Someone else was about to say something.
no, that was me. And I was going to say, I completely agree with Marita.
Okay.
It's a great idea.
See, I need the expertise of this group to help perfect this. So, and the groups I want this to work organically. So,
Do you pick the people to go in the group, or do the leaders pick the people?
I don't know yet, Judy. I'm gonna see, and I don't know that the groups, I don't see, the groups don't really have leaders. I think there will be people who will host groups.
Well, the host then.
And yeah. And, my experience is the groups, at least again, most of my experience with small group is with covenant discipleship groups. And with that model, what tends to work best for people is the day and time people are available to meet. Those people get together. Another way to do it, I'm thinking about here is, those who have volunteered to be hosts can, invite 3 or 4 friends to come and form a group. You all could do that yourselves. Think of people you would want to be in a group with together. And one of you could host a meeting and a group, and that would be your group. I would just like to know who those people are. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm looking at the time here. So is there any other final questions, comments?
When do we start?
Well, hopefully maybe next month we can get something rolling next month is my hope. That was my hope with my original proposal. That by November we could have something organized and starting. All right, I'm going to close us here. It's been a joy doing this with all of you. I've never done anything quite like this before. On Zoom, sitting in front of my computer, looking at your tiny little faces on my screen. I much prefer being in the same room with a group so I can read your faces and see your faces. But I hope this has worked for you, and I thank you for your faithfulness and showing up each week. And maybe, I hope we can do something, another study soon. Well, actually, I am gonna, thinking, we talked about this in a staff meeting, I'd like to do an Advent study in Advent, which will be probably on Zoom. And you'll be hearing more about that next month. But let's close with, I'm going to close with these words of Charles Wesley from his hymn, Jesus, Lord, we look to thee. Make us of one heart and mind, gentle, courteous, and kind, lowly, meek in thought and word, altogether like our Lord. Let us for each other care, each the other's burdens bear. To thy church the pattern give, show how true believers live. Amen.
Amen.
You.
Thank you, and good night all.
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you,
Stay.
Steve.